All right, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Craig Signal Paglia. Have been a VP of sales. I'm now doing some contract work and potentially starting my own business. Um, Been in sales longer than I care to say, as an individual contributor, as a manager, and then as a VP. Most recently, building teams or building the go-to-market strategy and also the whole motion itself.
Got it. And what are the pain points that you see for a business who's looking to scale and go to market? What are some, what are the main things that you see? Maybe like three top things where you're like, yeah, this seems to happen all the time that is easy to fix, or here are the fixes for it.
I mean, I think the main thing is the relationship and the communication between the founder and the sales leader.
Hmm.
If that is not solid, if I don't understand their vision and I don't communicate my strategy to achieve that vision, that could be an issue.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of different ways that could play out. That's probably the number one thing. Then I think the other thing is probably like I would say it's really testing quickly, testing and then pivoting quickly.
Mhm.
That's been a mistake I've made in the past. Like, let's go 3 months out with this. That's too long, certainly in a startup environment. Let's test it for maybe 60 days tops, and
Mhm.
then let's adjust. Or if we see leading indicators, let's adjust quicker if we can. That's probably the second thing. The third thing, the product and the company itself being ready for an enterprise play, if that's the direction you're going in. That there's been a couple of situations I've gone into where the actual product and what we're able to show, what we're able to talk about, what we're able to back up, did not line up with what we were saying we were doing. And then the support team also, and it's not anybody's fault. It's like when you're growing and you're scaling quickly, you do whatever you can. Everybody takes on two or three roles.
Mhm.
But if it's an enterprise play, if it's mid-market, then that's probably different. But if you want to go after enterprise, the company and the product and solution and everything down to security have to be ready for that.
Right, because you're doing it more of a mass scale. And then, what are the things you said about having the same vision ideals? Do you have, when they come to you, them say, this is exactly the amount of sales that we need to generate to hit whatever phase two or tier one? And then they kind of give you the reins to figure that out? Or is it more like, hey, I need, like, what's our game plan?
Um, I just realized the answer I gave you before was more focused on a longer term VP role, but
Okay.
it's similar to a fractional role, what I said before. It
Yeah.
still applies. Uh, so yes, I've seen both things.
Hmm.
Sometimes they'll come to me and say, here's what we need to achieve in this time period, and they'll have goals. Whether those are realistic or not, that depends on the situation. A lot of times though, it's more the second thing. Here's what we want to achieve. You tell me how we can do that. You're the expert in this area.
Well, that's
Tell me.
nice.
Yeah.
I like when they do that.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, well, you need this much money, this much sales team, you need this much going here and there. And they're like, oh, we can't do all that. And then you're like, you can do this. Um,
Well,
and
that's an interesting point, and that's something I had to learn. It's like when I've gotten in these roles, or even if I'm the number two person in the role, it's a learning adjustment. You come from a company that's a little more established,
yeah.
where you can ask for things, and it makes sense at that point. If they don't have the money for it, or they just, it's like the founder starts this thing with a vision and a dream and a hope, and then all of a sudden you're asking them for a significant amount of money. If I'm not clear why and what it's going to produce and what time period, that could go terribly wrong, that conversation.
Yeah, because they'd be like, I gotta pay you, and then I gotta pay for all this, and then I gotta pay for that. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what happens as you grow. You need to let people do their thing and hire the experts to do it. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. Um, what do you find to be one of the primary uh marketing channels that helps these businesses scale? Like if you were to set up, right, say a couple different scenarios. First scenario, you have an owner, brings you on, got some seed funding, maybe has a mill or two and is ready to grow it. And you're like, okay, you sold them that they don't need to put it all into R&D. They need to like get subscribers or generate some sales. How would you start that? What would you focus to start building up that sales pipeline?
Question. So first I would assess where they're at. If it's
Hmm.
founder-led selling, then that process may be drastically different than a scaled sales process.
Right.
And I have a process, and
Yeah.
that's fine too, because the way the founder sells is totally different than the way a sales. It's actually some ways it's a lot more direct and um, transparent.
Hmm.
And they have that leverage because they're the founder. It's been their vision all along.
Yeah.
People can feel that. when I come in, I have to align to that vision and communicate that in a way where the potential client will get that. But first thing I would do, there's actually a couple of things. It would
Hmm.
be, I would not do prospecting completely on my own. I've done that where I'm the BDR, I'm the AE, and I'm the sales leader. And those are three distinct
Oh,
different
wow.
things. And that's a heavy load. I would say I have 2 or 3 resources around the BDR motion that I would bring in. If it's only one, that's fine too. And then if they have a marketing person, I would work with them to create, all the educational stuff that's going out. And then use the BDR to kind of support that. Not this, yes, maybe just to get appointments. That was always the reason why they were there, but that doesn't work as well anymore.
Hmm.
It's a whole new game out there. And many times what I found is more qualified leads come from some type of event, meaning we host an event or hiring an industry expert that can open doors and then
Hmm.
leveraging the BDR to support all that and then schedule meetings. It's different than a BDR reaching out cold calling. There's still a place for that, but I wouldn't put all of my attention to just having the BDR generate pipeline. It
Yeah.
would be myself, the marketing person, and then the founder, anybody in leadership that has a network, and then the VC network that's supporting them as well.
Got it. So it's relationships essentially is how you're trying to establish, build this out. Now, with those relationships, what are the things that you feel that the sales team needs to be successful in closing that deal, in generating the awareness, in being able to, because you said educate, which is a big thing. Like, what materials would you want to see in an ideal, deck that would get to someone or be discussed?
Yeah, sorry, I just keep drinking water. As I've mentioned, I'm getting
It's
over
all
science
good. Yeah, yeah.
infections. Um, what materials would I want them to? So again, that depends on the stage of the company. If they have a
Mhm.
product and they have a message, if that's clear, then obviously I would want. It's funny, I don't use PowerPoint decks much at all anymore. Maybe one or two
Not
slides.
decks. It's just like sales material, right? Like, hey, here's this one
Yeah.
sheeter. Here's our testimonials. Like, from start to end, what pieces of material would you want to see that even if the business doesn't have it, it would be something they'd want to fill in right away? Like, maybe case studies, testimonials.
Well, like I would use a couple slides out of a deck that I would want that put together so we can pick myself and the sales team can pick parts of that out when we need it. And then certainly case studies are very, very helpful. Many times they don't have them. They have the anonymous case
Yeah.
study. Like this fintech company grew by 95% a year,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you don't mention who they are. There's no how they did that. So, but something around a case study, if they have it, 2 or 3 would be great. Industry specific ones. Um, some type of video, like a
Mhm.
small little video that can be sent out or videos that can be posted online because we need a social media presence. Um, and if they have something around ROI, either an ROI calculator or some type of slide that shows what it generates and how it does it, those would be important parts. So like something around the messaging that shows here's who we are, here's what we do, but in a visual way, case studies, and then something around the ROI. If we had some type of validation study, depending on the product, because I've worked with AI companies, we were doing hiring using
Mhm.
AI to hire, and we had to have third party like lawyers look at this and write letters saying this is ethical AI. There's no black box here. This is legal in a sense. We're not
Mhm.
doing it illegal. Those would be the elements that I would want in place, at least initially.
So you got your clear messaging, your case studies, your value proposition,
Mhm.
and anything else or or I guess messaging and videos falls under messaging, right? Any other pieces that could really make a big difference when trying to present to a potential client,
I guess
customer.
that depends on the company and the product.
Hmm.
How deeply you have to go having something that validates what you're doing. Depends on what you're selling. If you're
Yeah.
selling AI or something that potentially could get this company sued, then you have to have that locked down a lot more. And certainly everything around, your compliance issues in the tech side. Trying to think of what else I would even use.
Those are big selling points, right? Like if you could say, hey, we help generate this level of ROI within a period of time, they're gonna be like, there's the interest. Now it's
Yeah,
the follow through,
yeah.
right?
And ideally that would be in the case study.
Hmm.
If we had a client that 25x or whatever the percentage we grew their
Yeah.
business or whatever it is that we're doing, that would be the best case scenario. If we don't have that, then maybe some type of ROI slide or calculator that can show how we can generate that.
Okay. So now you got your materials, you've got your team, they're doing their outreach, they're sourcing warm leads. How do you structure their time and process in say a warm lead comes in, how would that flow look? You got your initial conversation, the warm lead comes in, what is your process to close that lead?
So let's see. I followed many different processes depending on
Yeah.
how big and small the team was. But ideally, what I want to get to a point where the BDR has a soft qualification. Yes, this makes sense to send it over to Craig and have them jump on a call, sets the appointment. Then I would handle the discovery call to see if this really is a qualified lead. If it's a salesperson working for me, they would do the same thing.
Mm,
And then depending on their aptitude or their ability, I might come into the call after that, or sometimes on the discovery call. And then we would just start working the process. After the discovery call, we might have a follow-up call. There might be a short demo. Like, I'm talking 5-10 minutes to get them interested, and then a scheduled demo with a larger team, the stakeholders essentially. And that would be a longer demo. And then there would be eventually side conversations with each of the stakeholders. If I can get that, then there'd be a tech conversation somewhere in there. We'd start the legal process as soon as possible if they're interested,
mm.
if I could. And then it's just working the rest of the process from there on out. So the BDR is essentially up until the point where we get a call scheduled. The AE would start taking that over for discovery and on, and then I would jump in as a VP. Any earliest it's going to be the discovery call. The latest would probably be for the larger demo.
Got it. And in all sales processes, it seems to be those two things. When you've got your qualified or unqualified, and then you have your discovery. So in the qualified, unqualified, how do you find out if someone's qualified or
I was about to say good discovery, but that doesn't always do it.
not? Right.
It's a good question. I mean, obviously we'd have a discovery process and we'd like, these are the things we need to consider this person
Mhm.
qualified. And they're traditional stuff, it's not anything. Sorry, you're gonna ask them.
No, I would say for before it gets to discovery, how are you identifying that this is a soft qual?
Yeah, again, I think that's I found out that's more of an art than a science in a way,
Yeah.
because it involves having a process. Does this person have authority? Is there a need?
Mhm.
Can we solve that need? That's a big thing.
I know that's what I was trying to get to. Yeah.
Yeah,
Need and
right.
authority, decision maker, right?
Yes. So like the typical band, I hate the whole, I hate the being locked down to band, but it does serve a purpose.
Mm,
But yeah, because so there's two different paths. If they don't have a need, then the salesperson can still work it, but they'd have to generate that need. That's a lot tougher. I mean, you could do the whole, you're missing out. The rest of your competition is doing that. They're going to do it when they're going to do it, no matter
yeah.
how good the salesperson is. But if it's qualified, that's different. So if they have meeting requirements, you wouldn't know budget early on unless they told that to you.
Yeah.
Is this person going to be somebody that they're not the decision maker? They seem like they're going to move this forward, and we'd have to test that with, okay, the next conversation is going to be a demo with your team. I'd suggest you invite the stakeholders to this. If they're able to do that and they're able to do it in a way where it sticks, then they're serious. If they're
Mm,
not, then they're not that serious at that point. So it's like little things that would be happening during the discovery, and action items shortly after discovery would test whether they're qualified or not.
yeah. I like to go, I'll do research. I'll go to like Crunchbase, be like, do they even have money? Right. And then that's the first part. They go, okay, it doesn't show anything here. Let's do the discover or let's do the see if they're qualified. And then they're like, okay, I've got an investor. And they're like, oh, okay, that's kind of hidden money. Or, I'm working a job and I have, my own money I'm trying to do this with. You're like, okay. Like,
That's a good point. Like obviously before the discovery, there have to be research done.
yeah,
I get crazy on that. Depending on the account, I could go really in depth on that. And then you get a discovery call and you realize this is going nowhere.
yeah, yeah.
But I think for a tier one account, it's still very, very important to come to the call knowing who they are. You won't know essentially what motivates them, but you can take a guess on that. What are they, how does the company make money, and how is this going to
Mhm.
benefit? Is our solution going to benefit them? If I have a hypothesis of how we're going to solve their problem, what the problem might be, that'll all get refined. But to come to the call with a viewpoint, I think is very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the discovery, what points you, because the need, right? That's always the hardest thing. Need and stakeholders. If you don't have those two things, the deal is pretty
Right.
much dead. So how do you find the need? Like, is there anything within the art of asking? Is there any ways that you're able to find the need? And there are any ways that you can identify if they're the stakeholder or you can get to the stakeholder?
That's a good question. I don't think to me, well, I don't know. It's it kind of like, I mean, you start the call off with an open-ended question, see what they actually
Hmm.
say. And then if they're clearly defining we need this and that those words are aligned with what I can do, then obviously
Yeah.
at least they know there's an alignment. Doesn't necessarily mean they have a need, meaning they might not really be motivated to solve that problem. But I would look for that. It's what they're telling me. Is it a true need? Like, yes, we need to solve this problem. We need to do it quickly. And here's what our outcome is going to be. So that, I mean, I would ask them, like, what do you, if we solve this problem, what does it do for you? Who would care
Hmm.
about this? And what does that mean in terms of the future? And then you would kind of get to some of that. Um, the second thing you asked was stakeholders. I would
Hmm.
just ask, or I'd ask them, the next call, here's based on what you're saying, based on my experience with other clients at this point, here's typically the process they follow and here's why. And then, say, let's set up another call with your boss or whatever, two stakeholders, whatever it is, and then see if they actually follow through with that.
Yeah. A lot of times I could hear it within how the person's asking questions. Like if they're using we, then I know, okay, there's other stakeholders involved. Or if they're using, I got to get this done. And if it's the I got to get this done because of my boss or I got to get this done because of my needs. So
It's giving me a headache and I don't want that
yeah,
or do it, which doesn't necessarily mean their boss cares about it or whoever doesn't care about
true,
it.
true. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, so all right. No, great. Yeah, these are, I find these things like these are so important as people, you're starting to build your business, you're scaling, and the sales team, they'll waste their time and spin circles on people they think need their service or product instead of trying to prospect because they've already got it. It's easier to work something that you've already
Yeah.
got there and do the busy work than it is to like, all right, let's keep going, let's keep hitting up these different channels. What channels on the cold aspect, right? Do you use to try and find potential clients or customers?
Yeah, it's this couple. It's certainly I would use a BDR and I would use them for a percentage of outreach. In the beginning, it might be all outreach, cold outreach. And then I work with two or three outsourced BDR agencies, and they're people that work for me or have been a BDR for me, and I trust them highly. So I would try to bring them if I have budget for it. There's also someone, a company called Orium, which does LinkedIn optimization. And
Hmm.
I've worked with them the last two companies, and they do a really, really good job at that. Um, and then there's the typical stuff like I hate going to conferences, but they are important at a certain stage. Try to get a speaker spot if you have the budget for it. And then networking events.
Hmm.
But all working with marketing, all that is great. The thing that has worked better than anything else, and it happened
Hmm.
at the last company, was that we hired an industry person from the industry. This person was the VP of learning and development for very large pharmaceutical company. So
Hmm.
he knew everybody, and he would just call his friends up or call people he knew who knew somebody else at a company who wanted to
Yeah.
go out. We get on a call and I'd let him go for like 10, 15 minutes building rapport. By the end of that 15 minutes, they're like, okay, let's do this. It was easiest thing to get the call scheduled. Of course, then getting from, yeah, I want to do something, let's explore this
Yeah.
to actually getting a sales process full of this business. That's still going to be challenging.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge many times is just getting them to a call. And that was the best thing that we ever
Wow.
did at the company.
In finance, a lot of times companies will buy a account rep or a licensed banker or someone because they got a book of business. And guess what that guy does? They go over there, they memorize all the phone
Yeah.
numbers, and then they're dialing all the people. Hey, I'm over here now. Okay, I'm gonna move all my stuff. And now it's even easier than ever to move all your stuff over. So it's like, yeah, that's an important thing. And that makes a lot of sense if you're at a certain point within a company and if you have budget and you could hire that person who has those connections, like that'll that's the easy way in.
That'll expedite your go to market motion immediately. Like
Yeah.
my pipeline was filled almost immediately as soon as that person came on board. I still had to do my own prospecting, or I had a BDR was doing it.
Yeah.
Uh, then let the companies have been at the founders still prospect, and I think that can be a very, very effective method to get
Hmm.
high quality, potential leads in the pipeline because it's coming from the founder.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and they have a different leverage when they reach out. The typical one I get, people reach out to me, hey, we're building this solution for salespeople. Based on what you do, looks like you'd be an ideal you'd be our ideal customer profile. Would you mind spending like 20 minutes and taking a look at this? Really, that's code for, we've already built this thing. We want to show it to you and then sell you it. But it's a nice approach. It's different
Yeah.
than like when you schedule a call, talk about your needs. It's like they're positioning me as an expert. And of course, that makes my ego very happy.
Yeah.
Whether I am or not,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I'm coming in. I'm coming in to sell this
Right.
thing. Awesome. And then a couple more questions. What of them you had said that you use LinkedIn? Because I think it's interesting. There's a lot of people who are starting out. I mean, LinkedIn could be great. What do you find a successful process to find people on LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn's got all these different titles and profiles and particular keywords to target through a search on Sales Navigator. What do you find success in leveraging it and how?
I think it's the two things I mentioned before. The
Mm,
company that I mentioned, that they optimize LinkedIn. So they take care of all of the outreach and the follow-up until the point they schedule a call or a
mm,
meeting. And then the founder, I would certainly focus the founder on LinkedIn. I would still do some of that stuff, but I have to
yeah.
admit my prospecting on LinkedIn is rarely successful,
Hmm.
no matter what I do. Unless I could try the old, we're building this product, building a solution.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works, but a lot of times it's
So
just,
much noise out there.
yeah, I get probably, I would say I get probably at least 10 emails or LinkedIn messages a day
Oh
with
yeah.
somebody to schedule a call, at least 10, sometimes it's more.
Yeah.
So it's hard to differentiate yourself. I mean, there are ways to do it, I know. One strategy so the two things that I've seen work better are
Hmm.
a little video example and the voice memo, whatever it is.
Voice note. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems, and I've used that in the past in email. I would just like use Loom or something. And then I'd create just short videos, giving them
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
10, 15 seconds, and then send it because it's very personal. They see me, they hear me.
Yeah. It's get you one step closer to them because it's such a numbers game, right? It's such a numbers game. And there's ways that you can leverage. So we've done this where we leverage different AI tools that we can then in mass target people with video, with someone saying their name to personalize it, with voice notes, right? With connection outreach based on search. So there's a lot that can be done. Um,
What have you seen to be the most effective?
well, it changes, right? So like what you're saying with those mass outreach where you would hit them up with like, hey, check out my product. That used to work years ago. Then it
Yeah.
got oversaturated. Then everyone in India and Pakistan sending these things out so that way you can build their website or make yours better. Right now, what I'm seeing is the voice notes. So essentially, what we've got going on is we've got the ability to target out in mass, use a sales navigator. We identify particular profiles, right, based on what we're looking to target. And we then set up a connection outreach that's automated. And within that is the voice note that comes out that then you got the voice note. The key is to do that voice note the right way. You got to make it so it doesn't sound like, hey, like it's just a recording. You gotta make it so it sounds like you're actually saying it at the time you're reaching out to them. Put some pauses in there. Stumble on some words, like make it authentic. Don't make it too tight, right? Make it conversational. So right now, that's what we're seeing a lot of success with. Cold email outreach, we're still seeing good success with. That's a numbers game, right? No big deal. Give me 30,000 emails. I'm going to upload it. I got 10 different email accounts sending out, that have been warmed up. Those will get some stuff going on. And we're seeing a more of a non-traditional approach, the direct, hey, problem solution, used to be
Yep.
like, this was it. All right, here's your three problems. Here's the solution. Here's who we are. Here's how it works. That used to be the standard model we see. You do it in videos, you do it in emails. People are just bogged down with everyone being an expert at whatever need they are. So it's almost like we're going back to like it's relationship, right? Like, hey, buddy, what's up, man? This is, let me stumble on some words and here's what might be able to do. And here's a direction we're thinking about going. Oh, I'm interested. And then boom, now
Yeah.
we've got a relationship. So that's what we're seeing.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, all the things the tactical stuff is sounds spot on to me, but the biggest thing you mentioned is the approach. You're
Hmm.
right. In everything across the board, it's a more personal, less buttoned up. It's two dudes on a call or with two people
Yeah.
on a call,
Yeah.
I'm not wearing a suit and tie, but it's the way we speak very informally. That I think people are kind of desperate for that because they've been sold so much, and the landscape of
Yeah.
selling is totally different. The way, because people come to the call much more prepared than, or they do the research. They don't need to talk to, they don't want to talk to a salesperson. They
Yeah.
never really did, but they had to in a way.
Because the info's not out there, right? Like you go buy a car now, and these guys know nothing. I'm sitting there schooling them on different models and options, going, what about this? What about that? And like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, well, why are you here? You don't deserve a commission. Get out of my way. Let me talk to finance. Let me negotiate this thing and get it done. Like,
That's funny.
but no. And then final thing, what are the AI tools you're using right now that help you out on your day to day?
Um, I use I use Perplexity for searches. Um, I like that much better than Google. I use Claude. I use ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Um, I played around with Gemini and Bard, but the main ones I use on a day-to-day basis, aside from like the calendar stuff,
Yeah.
is Claude. And Claude is the most I use that for most of the stuff where I put in my schedule, have it analyze that. I put in my sales process, have it analyze that. I put in customer profiles, and I can look at trends across that. I can look at trends across sales cycles. It's just for me, for whatever reason, I gravitated towards that, but most of them can do that. Um, but those are really the two that I use most,
Hmm.
Claude and ChatGPT.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time and having the call.
Thank you.
A lot of good info out there, and then we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.